the whole story with when Peter was preaching. They think they're not sure, but when Peter was preaching, and some of the people that were there that got saved in Israel were visitors from Rome. They went home to Rome, kind of started their own church kind of thing. It started growing. And from one commentator from back in that day said there were tons of them. It was a big thing in Rome at that time. And so it was growing like wildfire. So you had, thanks. So you had Greeks, and Rome was thick in the Greek, and then you had the Jews, and so the Jews were told to get out by one guy who was in charge. Then another guy came in charge and told to come back, and so you have a church that's you have a church divided, really. And so the Jews that came back to Rome were they probably took on this um, sense of Phariseeism. We look at Pharisees as somebody who's ritualistic and self-righteous, and so they it sounds like they kind of took that on and were really causing some problems in the church. But remember, Paul had not even been to Rome at this point. But he's hearing all of this, and he knows enough detail, and there's enough truth to it that he's writing this letter, and it's a very detailed letter. So the big sections in Romans are the wrath of God, chapters 1 to 4, the grace of God, chapters 5 to 8, the plan of God, chapters 9 to 11, and the will of God, chapters 12 to 15. So that's the 30,000 foot view of Rome. So now we're smack dab hard up into the wrath of God. And so he's trying to get onto, and he's trying to get onto these Roman church Christian Jews or whatever who are trying to follow some of the law, the old law. They brought this with them, and they saw the Pharisees, how they operated. And he's trying to get onto them and say, look, you're not righteous. You're doing some of the stuff that you're telling people not to do. Stop it. Stop judging each other. And so he's trying to save a church, is what he's trying to do at this point. And this church is so important because it is the key. All roads lead to Rome. All roads lead away from Rome. So it's key in the spread of the gospel. So he's trying to fix the church.
Salvage.
Yeah, it's trying to salvage it because it's going down the wrong road. They didn't have all the books that we've got now to help us how to do church, right? So, and they're trying to figure it out. Paul's pretty much figured it out, and so that's what happens. I'm going to read real quick what happens. Well, the first two words in Romans 2 are you therefore. So that means that it depends on what was before it. So I'm going to read Romans 1:28 down to 32 to kind of get our minds spun up on what was going on. He's talking about the bad things that people who are not God lovers are doing. So he says, furthermore, just as, and we could have gone further, but furthermore, just as they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, so God gave them over to a depraved mind, so that they do what ought not to be done. They have become filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, depravity. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They are gossips, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant, and boastful. They invent ways of doing evil. They disobey their parents. They have no understanding, no fidelity, no love, no mercy. All they know is God's righteous decree that those who do such things deserve death. They do not only continue to do these very things, but they also approve of those who practice them. So people who are not interested in doing the will the Lord, obviously. Now he's setting these folks up for a slam, because in Romans 2:1, somebody read 2:1-4, and Kevin,
I can do it. I wanted to.
you wanted to. You're
Yeah.
immediately to my
I was
left.
raising my
So
hand.
I know, I saw that. Go 1-4, if you please, would
Yes,
sir.
sir. Therefore, thou art inexcusable, O man, whosoever thou art that judgest, for wherein thou judgest another, thou condemn thyself. For thou that judge doesn't the same thing. But we are sure that the judgment of God is according to truth against them which commit such things. And thinkest thou this, O man, that judgest them which to do such things and doest the same, thou shalt escape the judgment of God? Or deepest thou the riches of his goodness and forbearance and the long suffering, not knowing that the goodness of God leadeth thee to repentance?
Okay.
I think I butchered 2 and 3, but y'all got the idea.
Well, you King James it to us, so we were
Yeah,
trying to
I
hang
did.
on.
That's real tricky, man. I'm telling you. I need to,
Yeah.
yeah.
He's
Darn.
really telling them to stop being so judgmental, is he not?
Yeah, and he's saying,
Not be a
listen,
hypocrite.
Don't be a hypocrite. Stop it. That's right. And so, but we got to be careful with this. So is he saying, do not judge?
he's saying, what he's saying is that he's saying don't judge, but what he's saying is that it's all this stuff is going to come back on you. When you judge, then you're going to get judged by our Father in heaven.
Yeah. And that's
All of these things,
yeah.
and in here, you get the feeling that there's no forgiveness. There's no, very stiff necked, very like, pointing at you when there's 3 fingers pointing back at you. You're pointing the finger,
Yep.
and it's total anti-Christ. There's no cold. I'm right, you're wrong, but I can do it and you can't.
Exactly. You nailed it on the head, probably better than I could have written it down, but you quoted from Matthew 7, do not judge, you will be judged. In the same way you judge, you'll be judged. With the measure you use, it'll be measured to you. So
I didn't say it that eloquent, but you're right. That's what I meant.
I just read it. So yeah, but yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a matter of intent, because we have to judge. If we were not to judge in the church or pretty much anywhere, then what he just laid out in chapter 1, then he did wrong, because he was judging in chapter 1 pretty much, right?
Right.
He comes out and he says, but don't judge in chapter 2. So that's not what he was intending, not the way he intended for us to take it.
And on top of that, it seems like he's getting back to the basics of gospel when he said, here is, what, this other stuff, this is the basics, and y'all need to get back to the basics, which will get you back on track.
Yeah.
But these are the basics that he's going through, forgiveness, the wrath, all this, it's the basics.
Yeah. You sound like a coach. We got to get back to the basics. Blocking, catching, whatever. So,
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in 4, that's well said, Kevin. But in 4, he talks about that they're doing well. Obviously, he says they've got riches, they got some kindness going on, some forbearance, patience, not realizing that God's kindness is intended to lead you to repentance. So he's saying the mercy of God showing you right now, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. But the Lord's mercy and kindness that he's showing you is just holding back. And we're going to prove that in verse 5. Ned, would you read verse 5?
Certainly. But because of your hard and impotent heart, you are storing up wrath for yourself on the day of wrath, when God's righteous judgment will be revealed.
Okay, so obviously he saying, and I guess this is a personality of trait of God, that he's going to let things go for a long time. You know, we talked about in Revelation that a lot of the terminology that was used in the Greek meant that he waited until things were ripe and almost overripe. He waited as long as he could before the wrath was released. And so it's kind of the same situation. It's just the way he is. He doesn't want to engage in a bad way until it's like a dam building up. And eventually that dam builds up and boom, it all comes out. So these guys are acting like Pharisees. And I had to do this, and I apologize already, but it was very interesting. The Pharisees, you know, were leaders in the Jewish society, Jewish religion. And so I got to thinking, well, all right, well, where did the Pharisees come from? So I don't know how they started.
That's a good question.
Yeah, so let me give you a little history lesson here. And one of the things that made me think of it was the way they handled Nicodemus in this, in The Chosen, in the movie series I'm watching that I love.
Good series.
Huh?
Good series.
Isn't it good? It's just addictive. I love it.
I can't wait for the next season.
Oh, me too. So it starts back in 732 BC. The Assyrians kill and haul off a bunch of Jews from Israel. In 597 BC, the Babylonians kill and haul off many of the Jews and kind of finishes them off. In 539 BC, the Persian king Cyrus defeats the Babylonians, and so he owns the Jews and he owns Israel. But they allowed the Jews to live in Israel and rebuild the walls and rebuild the temple and so forth. In 334 BC, the Greek Alexander the Great, remember him, conquered the Persians, which all included Israel. There was a Greek guy by the name of Ptolemy, and he pushes the Greek way and all his subjects and so forth, and they start trying to push the culture of Greece on the Jews. They didn't really like it, but it lasted for a while, and then this guy takes over in 200 BC. His name is General Seleucids, and he pushes the situation even further. In 180 BC, there was Antiochus Epiphanes. We've heard of him. He pushes even further, and he says, you know what? He gets up in their face and he says, we're going to have one of you guys sacrifice a pig on the altar in the temple. That freaks everybody out, but there's one Jewish guy that agrees to it, and he says, okay, I'll do it. But before he could do it, the people who were committed murder the Jewish guy who was going to do it, and it incites the Maccabean rebellion. We've heard about the Maccabean. They got the Maccabees in the Apocrypha, the book, the Maccabees. So that's kind of where that comes from. So and the Maccabean rebellion, it's successful, and so then they have their country back. So then what do? How do you govern? And so they try to go back to the laws of God, but there are two sects that come to power: the Sadducees and the Pharisees. The Sadducees are, they kind of like the Greek rule, the Greek ways, kind of getting into that. And they kind of think that all the old stories of supernatural type stuff out of the Bible, like raising people from the dead and stuff, is not really a deal. And then you've got the Pharisees who want to go back to the pure. You call them purists. Go back to the law. They're very conservative, and they try to organize Israel in that way. So they got two parties, and I've heard of this before. One's conservative and one's liberal, right? And that's exactly what they had. They had the Sadducees and they had the Pharisees.
Pharisees.
And they, like us, they had the Congress called the Sanhedrin, where both the Pharisees and the Sadducees shared power. So, and there is, there was this constant rub. The only time that those two sects, those two parties agreed was when they agreed to get rid of a guy who was about to mess up their system.
Jesus.
And that was in about 33 AD. Yeah. So there's the backstory. So the Pharisees started trying to do what they understood God wanted them to do. They, by the time Christ came along, they had gone way too far into the law giving and the law keeping and being so ornery. But they started good, but like any man-made organization,
lost their way.
So therein is the backstory. Now you know the rest of the story, right? So,
Paul Harvey.
Go ahead. All right. 6 through 11. Doug, please.
He will render to each one according to his works. To those who by patience and well-doing seek for glory and honor and immortality, he will give eternal life. But for those who are self-seeking and do not obey the truth, but obey unrighteousness, there will be wrath and fury. There will be tribulation and distress for every human being who does evil, the Jew first and also the Greek. But glory and honor and peace for everyone who does good, the Jew first and also the Greek, for God shows no partiality.
Okay. This bothered me for a while because there is no Jesus in that. There's no Redeemer in that. And if you read it at surface level, it says you can be saved by works. But he's setting them up. It's similar to somebody says, what if somebody's a good person and they've never heard the gospel and then they die, but they had a lot of good works. So in other words, that usually the question is asked, what if somebody who's innocent dies? Well, the truth of the matter is nobody's innocent. And he's going to settle all this in later chapters. But right now, he's got their attention. Think of it in context. He's got the Roman church's attention right now. And they're acting like these righteous acts of condemning each other are building themselves up, that type of thing. That's
now
kind of where he's
thinking. At this point in time, does the church in Rome respect Paul?
Evidently so, because he names them later on by name later on. But they've never seen him face to face. So maybe they've read some of his writings. It's implied in his writing that he knows them at least by name. So maybe they were Facebook friends. I don't know.
That's where the original tablet came from.
Right. Oh.
Hey, not bad.
It's a zinger, but it's a doozy.
It's a good one. I like that.
Yeah, thank you.
That's a good question. But there is some familiarity there. And I would figure he's really familiar because he is just he's up in their face right now. He's up in their grill.
But they respected him enough where he put, quote, the fear of God in him.
Well, yeah.
So they must have known, and
Mhm.
Paul must have been known to them, and that he was, as far as what Jesus was, one of the apostles.
Yeah.
And you better listen to him.
Yeah. And it's interesting. He almost follows the same pattern or concepts as from the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5-7. If you read the Matthew 5-7 account, and you're reading what the words of Christ are, it does sound works based. So much so, Jesus says, unless this had to be jaw dropping. Unless your righteousness exceeds that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. Well, I've said it before here, that these were people that were paid to be good. And so if you think that I can be better than them, that's impossible. That's what they were thinking at this time, obviously. They didn't know about the sacrifice that was coming, and that would be the redeeming value of this whole situation. But Jesus didn't really reveal that to them at this time. He's setting them up. Just so Paul is setting the Romans up at this point for what's coming later. I don't see. He must have had a really good word processor. I don't know. I mean, to lay this all out.
Well, how'd you like to get that letter? Oh God.
Ooh.
You're smiling and crying the next 2 days reading it, and then smiling and crying. And yeah, it's
tough.
You ever think about I thought about this one time. I believe that this letter is the inspired word of God, but you know that he went through some rough drafts. You know that he probably gone through a couple of versions of the letter before it got sent. You ever thought about that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And or the Spirit just had a hold of him, and just laying it down.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask him that one day.
Yeah, when we get there, let's ask him. Yeah.
How many times did you attempt to write that letter first?
You want to talk about writer's cramp? My hands, carpal tunneled up, man.
All right.
That's the thought of the night. I'm sorry.
No, you're right. It's agreed. So he's going to make the point that if you want to go by works, fine. You are welcome to go for works, but it ain't going to work. It's just not going to work. But that's what you're trying right now. So I'll start reading in 12. All who sin apart from the law will also perish apart from the law, and all who sin under the law will be judged by the law. For it is not those who hear the law who are righteous in God's sight, but it is those who obey the law who will be declared righteous. Indeed, when Gentiles who do not have the law do by nature things required by the law, they are a law for themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the requirements of the law are written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and their thoughts sometimes accusing them, and at other times even defending them. This will take place on the day when God judges people's secrets through Jesus Christ, as my gospel declares. And when he says my gospel, it's kind of like saying a gospel that he owns, that he's responsible to. So it's not his brand new gospel, even though that's the way it kind of sounds. It's the gospel of Christ, but he has ownership of it. He loves it so much. So as for the judgment by the law and whatnot, he's really pointing his finger, remember, at the Jews who had the law and are trying to bring in the law into the church. And he's saying that no, and chill out on the Greeks who are in your church who didn't have the law. They're acting like they had the law and you didn't even have, they didn't even have it. So that's the concept there. I mean, there was a lot of law having it, judge, and that type of thing there. Did anybody else get anything there? Good comments?
Well, he shows both sides, and especially, and he defends the Gentiles. Listen, don't think you're uppy just because you have the law and you're better than everybody else. I see his compassion for the Gentiles, even though for the Gentiles which have not the law, do by nature the things contained in the law, and it's in their hearts. And really, when it comes down to it, the New Testament, isn't it? It's the heart. It's not what you do by deeds or what you're showing off in front and your processions, or it's what's in your heart.
Well, doesn't Scripture say that we'll be judged by by our hearts?
Yes, and this says secrets, but yeah, what's in your heart, and isn't really that's a major part of it. It's not worrying about the processions and everything that's, this is what we do. This is real. This is down to the basics, man. They have it in their heart. They may not have had the law, but they do most of that stuff, what you guys are supposed to be doing, but they have it in their heart and in their mind.
And this seems to be the crux of the problem, because they acted like Judaizers, which are people who are bringing in the law and pulling in grace, and those two they
don't mix.
They really don't. But they were trying, and they probably just saw the Pharisees act, and they probably just said, "Well, this is what we got to do.
This is how you do it."
Yeah, but I love what you said in the judgment thing, as far as it's a matter of the intent of the judgment. Is your heart broken to have to say something to your brother, or is it like you need to stop doing that, or you're going to go to hell, or whatever? That's pretty judgmental. That's pretty.
And it's not. All you're doing is creating another adversary instead of trying to solve the problem.
Right.
Right.
Yep. Exactly. Let's do Kevin, if you would do 17 through 21. Okay.
It's a long one. Take a deep breath.
Out loud.
Ricky's froze.
Uh-oh. We lost Kevin. You coming back?
Yep. He's froze up.
Yep.
Retest.
There you are. I think you're coming back.
Yeah, I'm done reading. I'm just kidding.
You just started moving again, brother.
Do it again.
All right, 17.
Weekend at Bernie's again.
If you're with us.
Boy, behold, still with me?
I think so.
You get behold.
We got
Thou art
behold.
called a Jew, and retest in the law, and make us thy boast of God, and knowest his will, and approve the things that are more excellent, being instructed out of the law, and are confident that thyself are a guide of the blind, a light to them which are in darkness, an instructor of the foolish, a teacher of the babes, and has the form of knowledge and the truth in the law. Thou therefore, which teachest another, teachest thou not thyself, that preachest a man should not steal and does not steal. I got to get rid of this King James version because this is a tongue twist. Y'all just laugh and help me out there. Doug, you're rotten to the core. I hear you back there. I mean, look, God, it's like, huh, when he make it past third grade, the boy can't even read. But man, that's a tongue twister. Paul should not have done that.
All right, and so he's
Okay.
chastising them. So go ahead. Did you make it to the bottom of 21?
I did.
Okay, good.
That's twice now.
It's we're kind of popping in and out on mine. But
I could tell by the look on your face, like, boy, he's just stuttering a lot tonight. Oh Lord.
but he's kind of chastising them or making fun of them a little bit. You who say you're all kinds of special, you're the light, right? And so he's sticking sticking his face in there, sticking his finger in their face again. It kind of made me think of Matthew 7:21, which is a very scary verse, 21 to 23. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name cast out demons, and perform many miracles? And I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. So these guys are, by the law, doing what they think is the right thing, but they are the doers. They have no internal tenderness. They don't have the circumcision of the heart that Paul will talk about later. And that's the crust of the problem, the tenderness that is needed in church as we deal with people. Ned, would you do 22 through 24?
Sure. You say that one must not commit adultery. Do you commit adultery? You who abhor idols, do you rob the temples? You who boast in the law dishonor God by breaking the law. For as it is written, the name of God is blasphemed among Gentiles because of you.
Okay. There's this whole thing of making the church look bad, you know.
Yeah.
And we don't want to be doing that.
And that you see that so often. How often do you hear non-believers say, look at this instance of sin in the church. Look at this instance of, it's so hypocritical, and that's the excuse they use for not going to church, is pointing out the sins of churchgoers.
And a perfect is, Jerry Falwell, from Liberty College. Yep. I just hate seeing that because I think it's a great college. So many good things come out of that. And then you hear this stuff and it gives the other side ammo. And how can you blame them for someone who hasn't gone to church and look at that and say, hey, and that's bad stuff right there. I mean, that's like, you guys did hear about that. That's just.
Yeah. And this is a slight rabbit run, but I am convinced, and I pray for my sons often who are or have been in the ministry, that I honestly believe that Satan targets pastors and those in religious
you think?
positions.
You know what the great Billy Graham said?
What's that?
Billy Graham said, I never went in an elevator or any place without my wife, because he says, Satan will tempt me. And he says, listen, he says, the higher you are, the harder he's going to try to bring you down. And I absolutely agree with that, Rich, 100%.
Yeah.
And Billy Graham himself says, hey, you know what? As much as I believe and I have faith, I'm not untouchable. But, to think that I can't be tempted. And he says, I'm not doing it. That's why, elevator, wherever he was, he always had his wife with him.
Yeah. Or not a single woman. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
That is correct.
Yeah.
He
Because-
never put himself in a place of temptation.
Exactly.
I mean, who would believe
Or
Billy
the
Graham?
way-
He says, listen, it'll happen.
Yeah. Well, or temptation, or the look of evil.
The setup, anything like that, to stain somebody that is a child of God.
Mhm.
We must bring him down.
Yeah.
We
So
must show. Yeah.
Kind of in the same vein, and equally harmful to the name of the church, or is the self-righteousness, saying,
Mhm.
we're going to condemn this sin, but don't talk about, we're going to, and kind of another very popular topic, say like the Catholic Church, abuse within the church, or
Mhm.
things that get swept under the rug. And so we're going to kind of ignore this
Yeah.
and project this air of self-righteousness and that sort of thing. And
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
right.
Which
Right.
really ties into what we just read, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Perfectly.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Perfectly. Yeah.
That's two good ones I come up with tonight.
Wow. What? Kevin's just hot
On a
tonight.
roll.
On a hot streak.
It's crazy.
All right. Now
It's
we're
like a
going to
shooting star.
Huh?
It's like a shooting star. It doesn't have it off of me. You better capture it when it does.
Fizzle, fizzle. I'm sure there's a compliment in there. Yes.
All right. We're going to make us real sore. We're going to talk about circumcision.
Here comes the cutting part now.
Here it comes.
Give that one to Doug.
Is that
Thank you.
Doug? That's a Doug. All right.
Yeah.
Doug, you do 28 and 29, please, sir. Painfully.
28, 29.
Yep.
28. Wait.
We're at 25.
25, Rich.
25 yet.
You are correct. I am sorry. 25 through 27. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Woo.
I was wondering if it was just me.
No. You are on it.
I thought you were skipping over the cutting part.
We cut it out.
Just too hurtful.
To 27.
Mhm.
For circumcision indeed is of value if you obey the law, but if you break the law, your circumcision becomes uncircumcision. So if a man who is uncircumcised keeps the precepts of the law, will not his uncircumcision be regarded as circumcision? Then he who is physically uncircumcised but keeps the law will condemn you, who have the written code and circumcision but break the law.
What kind of circumcision is Paul talking about? You got the Jews who who understood a physical circumcision. What type of circumcision do you think Paul's talking about?
The spiritual.
Spiritual
Of the heart.
Of the heart, absolutely.
Right.
You can. We won't go through these. Time's getting short. But Ezekiel 44, Exodus 6:12. Let's see. Well, Ezekiel 44 talks about tenderness of the heart. Exodus 6:12 talks about a tenderness of the lips. Jeremiah 6:10, a tenderness of the ears. And so, and then relating them to circumcision. So, there's a story in the Old Testament where, concerning Dinah, if you recall, that Jacob's sons or Isaac's sons, I can't remember, told some folks that they could be a part of the clan kind of thing. We could marry with them, and they said, yeah, just got to be circumcised. They got circumcised, and then a few days later they came and overtook the tribe, so and killed them all. So because they were sore, at that time. And but God wants our tenderness our soreness, our tenderness to be in our heart, lips, and our ears. And that's his desire with a spiritual circumcision.
So it's just soreness?
Soreness and tenderness.
Okay. Because I had read something one time where it was talking about, you know what physical circumcision is? It's the removal of.
Yeah.
Okay. And the spiritual circumcision would be the removal of all the bad things, the sin of our past, removing them and to bring in the good.
Okay.
So that's
Remove
a different understanding.
Removing the flesh, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, of your old self.
Right.
You know, removal of your old self to let the new self take over.
Right. I can see
I
that.
can dig that.
Yeah, I can see that. But in this, it seemed to talk in the commentary. It seems to lean toward God wanted a tenderness in the church, as opposed to the harsh judgments, and that's kind of where he was going with this. There's probably every analogy breaks down, but there's probably multiple ways we could pull that in,
Okay.
That's a good place. Good point. But the Jews were relying on their physical circumcision. Regardless of what I do, I'm circumcised. I'm good, and I've got the law. I'm good. And so that was a major problem. Major problem. All right, 28 and 29. Ned, would you do it?
For no one is a Jew who is merely one outwardly, nor is circumcision outward and physical, but a Jew is one inwardly, and circumcision is a matter of the heart, by the Spirit, not by the letter. His praise is not from man, but from God. There you have it.
There you go. So, may our heart be circumcised, especially if we ever have to point out an issue to a brother, right?
Yeah.
So, all right. Any other comments?
Excellent.
You even got a history lesson tonight. Aren't you smart?
We did. It was very good.
That was great. Thank you.
Very welcome. But so glad we made it through the storm. All is well. Everybody's families are okay.